Hello. I hope that this session will be a little bit time to decompress, to think thoughtfully about the overall process. It is meant, the purpose of this session is to save you time and effort and energy. So the whole my sort of snappy title for this was like, wait, don't remediate. Because before you get into remediating documents, let's think about big picture. There was a great question in the chat and the main session about what would be easiest. And that is so labor specific and individual. So today I want to talk about some of those options that will hopefully make that easier for you to gauge the labor. So, okay. Here's some audience expectations. If you were in PD Day in the spring, it was the exact same things, just remaining present. Hopefully, you can turn your mind off a little bit and relax and decompress from the previous session. But I'm going to be, like I said, this session is for you. So if you have questions, make note of them, and I'll try to address them towards the end. We're trying to, have a warm and wonderful space. There are, of course, situations where things get heated. Hopefully, nothing like that will happen today. Like I said, I'm hoping everyone will just be chill and we can just go through today, thinking big picture, thinking about how to best serve our students and come together as a community, and everything will be happy. So, objectives for today. Identify why a document is not accessible, and I will go over some specific examples about what documents I'm talking about. Identify whether a video has auto captions or professional captions. Select appropriate alternative formats for documents that aren't accessible, and select appropriate technologies or strategies for videos that are not professionally captioned. So, pretty short and simple, but again, hopefully this will help you gauging the kind of labor that you'll be needing to do for your courses now that you've seen some panorama scores and just thinking overall big picture. So, scenario-based thinking, decision trees. So I have three decision trees. Two of them we do have documents already created that we will be able to share after this. I'm going to go through sort of the structure and some of the content on those documents. We're also hoping that they will be living online at some point, but we don't know where yet. And then for the videos, I don't have a document yet, but it's coming. Again, we might do more of a tutorial because it's video rather than a document, but I wanted to go over that today. So as I said, so to wait before you remediate was kind of my theme for today. Why should you wait? PDFs are never the most accessible option. They were the default for a very long time, but they're never going to be the most accessible option because they are so complicated and so difficult and so proprietary. PDF remediation is time consuming. It can be really fast. It can take less than 5 minutes, or it can take you hours if you're trying to approach that. So before you go into remediation, or if you see a document and you're like, there's 1,000 errors in here, including tagging, I don't know how to remediate this. Let's look at some other options that are out there that would save you time rather than remediating the PDF. PDFs are no longer the only file option. There are other options that are out there, especially if you're thinking about locking down content so that students can't change it, that kind of thing. Or if you are having content that is changed constantly, there are new options as well. Scanning technologies has improved in the past 10 years, shockingly. I encountered this in my personal work. I made photocopies of some documents and 10 years ago for my dissertation. And I recently contacted the archive and was like, hey, you guys wouldn't let me scan these, 10 years ago. Could you do scans now? And the scans are just like beautiful. They're so pretty. They're incredible, high technology, everything like that. So if you have things older than 10 years or even 5 years, rescanning is potentially going to be a time saver compared to remediating a PDF. And the other thing is, organizations and businesses are also held to US and EU compliance standards, and I will go into the EU thing in a second. But again, like all of this labor, while it is on you to make sure that everything in your course is compliant, and accessible for our students, and we're doing right by them. Um, Organizations and businesses are equally held responsible. So maybe not everything is on you because JSTOR has to make sure OERs, anything that's public and public facing has to go through the same process that you're all going through. Let's see. Yes, that's the whole point, Jennifer, is to go through this decision tree. So I have one more slide that I'm going to talk about EU stuff, and then we're going to go straight into the decision trees for today. So what has changed since 2022? The European Accessibility Act, which is even more strict than the DOJ requirements and applies to all consumer-facing websites. And they had from 2022 to 2025 to meet the standards. In 2025, they started policing and enforcing them. And failure leads to fines. So when fines happen or the ability to not put your product out there happens, people make changes. So a lot of these things, these companies who are potentially, let's say a textbook is used here, but also used in the UK. Okay, they're going to be meeting UK standards because they want to make sure that that textbook gets sold. So there is potentially some fallout benefit for people in the US because they've already had to meet these EU standards. So they've probably already made a lot of changes. So first of all, we're going to talk about the PDF decision tree because that's the one who's sort of top of mind for everybody. I have 9 questions, scenario based. I've got some examples, and then the document also has some tutorials on it. So as I said, this will be available probably on the PD website, at least as a download along with the slides that I have here. We're going to see if it can live somewhere else electronically, hopefully in the future. So you don't even have to go download it. That's my goal. Because as I said, nothing is going to be more accessible than sort of online stuff, right? Documents are not as accessible as digital things, so, and websites. So question number 1, how often is it updated? Is the content in this document updated regularly? So if you have a document that is updated frequently or needs to be uploaded in multiple places, consider a non-PDF option to avoid having to make a new PDF every time changes are made, especially if the PDF is particularly tricky. So this could be keeping it in the Word document format and making sure it's read-only or not editable in some way. Same thing with hosting it potentially online on OneDrive, so that it is something that, again, can't be modified because, you can have permissions to make people viewer only. So that's one option that you can do. Also, Canvas stuff. If you have an assignment that you're writing the date on every single time, putting that in the Canvas site can make it easier. Quizzes and pages, if you have physical quizzes with dates and other information, I will go into more examples about how Canvas can help with content that is in PDF. And as we heard in the panorama session, there are some great tools out there for converting things to HTML to go inside of Canvas. So yay, this is all not on you. Rebuilding worksheets as Canvas quizzes. Again, like there are certain kinds of things that you can do that things are going to be more accessible inside of Canvas than as files, or at least be an alternate version. Question number 2, was the PDF a Word file first? Do you have access to the original Word file? So again, if you have the original Word file, make the file accessible, consider sharing that file. You can make it a read-only file. If it has to be in a PDF for whatever reason, WebAIM has tutorials on how to create accessible PDFs that are fillable forms from Microsoft Word documents, or other kinds of documents that could be accessible PDFs. WebAIM is the great organization. We have tutorials for them. They have tutorials on their website. We can share that kind of resource. If you don't have access to the original Word file, you can make one. Yay, happy day. All you have to do is export the PDF as a doc file. And that will give you a nice version. It doesn't always come over, but if it was a pretty simple file and it was created in Microsoft Word, if you export it as a docx file, usually it exports pretty well. And then once you've made it accessible, you can use this exported doc file, or you can re-export that as a PDF once you've made it accessible. This is particularly good for things that have tagging issues. If you export it back to Word and then re-import it back into Adobe, a lot of those tagging issues can be fixed. Question number 3, PDFs that are learning activities. If the PDF is an assignment or learning activity, digital online versions are always going to be the most accessible options for screen readers. So, for those of you who are doing in-person courses, I know that's not like 100% a good thing, but we're also talking about making sure alternative versions are available. So everything I'm talking about today in terms of building things in Canvas, doesn't mean you can't also have a Word document. What it means is that if you're providing an alternate version, building that alternate version in Canvas may save you some time as opposed to remediating the PDF to meet accessibility standards. So pages can be used to describe things and also to be assigned on the calendar. That's really good for people who are just providing information. Hey, there's this upcoming thing. You can assign pages to be read. It's also good for students who are using like an app to be able to see it on the goal and see it in their to-do list. Those are, like I said, there's a lot of benefits to using that. Assignment descriptions for existing gradebook columns. If you have a column in Canvas for a gradebook, you already have a place to write an assignment. You don't have to create anything extra. So that's also something just like leverage what you already have. There's different types of quizzes in Canvas. Not everyone is super familiar with it, especially if you came from like a Blackboard school or a Moodle school. So there are graded and ungraded quizzes. So some are practice ones. You can have practice ones done as many times as you want. And there's also surveys, which is more graded and ungraded surveys, which is for collecting sort of anonymous data. So it's a great alternative for small course evaluations. You know, a lot of people do midterm check-ins. Hey, how are we doing? How are we all feeling about these assignments? You can collect those rather than on in person online using an ungraded or graded survey. Question number 4. Home and library access. Love seeing my librarian friends in here. You're all awesome. You rock. We want to be able to support you as much as we can. And getting access to things through the home and library is a great way to support our librarian and librarians, but also is probably going to be, it should be your number one stop if you have a PDF that is a book, a textbook, journal article, newspaper, magazine, etc., because they're going to have the links and the access behind paywalls to places for students to go out to that actual website, which, again, as I mentioned, the websites for these organizations and corporations have to be accessible. So they will always have an accessible version. Some of the lower, like the more independent presses may not, but for big name things, this is where you want to check first. Link to the permalink if it's available in a database, ebook, or behind paywalls, because guess what? They will change links on you. I have run into this so many times where it's like EBSCO host is like, oh, just kidding. We're going to totally change that link. So now it's broken in your Canvas site. But if you go through the Holman library with the permalink, it's always going to link out to where it needs to go. And as I say, bonus, giving the library data for clips that helps prioritize resources to continue pertinency. So we love to give our library friends data and prove to them that we are actually using what they pay for. Course reserve options for content the library does not own. So they are also a great resource for this. And you can also make collection requests for texts that are required in your courses. So they are a great ally and going to be a big support here. Before you remediate that big PDF of that chapter of that textbook, contact them first, see if it's available. Save yourself money and use our resources. Question number 5, PDFs that are created from scans. This is sort of related, and I've talked about it as well. Scans have improved, scanning technology has improved, and there are strategies and techniques for scanning to make better PDFs now than there was before. So rescan if possible. If you can get a copy, if you have a copy, or you can interlibrary loan a copy, rent a copy for the library, et cetera, et cetera. I said rent, I didn't mean that. Check out a book from the library or a public library, other institutions. Taking care with scanning to avoid the black edges can help. And you can, if you are scanning something and it's small and it gives you black edges, you can use features inside of Adobe to crop that, get those black edges out so they don't show up as distracting images that are going to make a PDF difficult. Scan is an image file if there's not text on it. So sometimes we see like images that are exported as PDFs or JPEGs for a variety of different reasons. If it's an image, do it as an image and not as a PDF. So if you have a photograph or something like that. You want a specific image from a textbook, and you just want the image or the graph. See if you can export that as an image because we know how to handle images. We have alt text. It's happy. So, and we have captions and strategies like that. So rather than giving the whole PDF just for the image, see if we can just take that image out of there. Question number 6, PDFs that are forms. There is, in my next section, I talk about fill in the blank specifically, but this is what I'm going to talk about, form type activities. So if the PDF is a form style activities for students, fill this out, provide information, answer these questions, et cetera, et cetera. Always look to building Canvas and a quiz or a survey. If you're not looking for student-centered form activities in PDFs, I do go over that other options in the second part where I talk and fill in the blank. But like I say here, if it's for other colleges' purposes, Microsoft Forms, is it the best? No. Is it an option? Yes. So that's something to look into. If a quiz or survey or Microsoft Forms don't work, remediating the PDF using the accessible Adobe form, using Microsoft Word and Adobe Acrobat Pro. So this is a complicated process. WebAIM has a good tutorial on it. So it's not impossible, but it is time consuming. So again, we want to try to save you guys as much time as possible. And so if you can look at the options of building in forms, which you're familiar with, versus remediating the PDF, those are the kinds of labor assessments this presentation is designed to help you with. Question number 7, PDFs that are graphics and flyers. I see this a lot. If the PDF or even the image sometimes is a graphic or flyer that is being distributed by email, if you're distributing it as a file attachment, make sure to include all of the information inside the graphic or flyer in the body of the email, because that way it is an alternative format that is simultaneous. And that is the big thing here. We want to, for accessibility and ADA and to be compliant, should be no more clicks to get to an accessible version than to get to an inaccessible version. So including all of the information inside of a file attachment, inside the body of an email is something to keep in mind. Is the content going to be printed? So general things here for assessments, activities, make sure there's a digitally accessible version. And we already talked through different options for different types of activities. And of course, you can always consult with us. Lecture notes, reading excerpts, etc. Digitally accessible version. A chapter from a textbook. Again, like these are all things to think about and think about the different ways to do that. So I have a PDF, one that is an assignment description. I can put that right into Canvas inside of my assignment description. I also have a chapter from a textbook. I can contact the Holman Library and hopefully there's a version, an ebook there that I can link to, or they can help me or put it on course reserve. Graphics, flyers, announcements. I made a pretty version of a syllabus. Okay, I love a syllabus. That's pretty. So making sure there's also a digitally accessible version, I can build that into Canvas. And sometimes we can make it look just as pretty inside Canvas with HTML. So as I said, alternative formats are communicating information simultaneously. So that's that part on PDFs. One more question here. If you believe that none of the scenarios described in this decision tree are applicable to your situation, you can always try UJA PDF remediation or get a sense of the kinds of errors. If you, again, are doing a labor assessment of what's going to take me more time to do, and what are you technically feeling like you're capable of doing. There's a big learning curve, obviously, with using any new technology. So if you think it's going to take you more time to learn a new technology, potentially make a different option or explore different options. If the UJA PDF remediation does not fix your issues, you can contact eLearning with a PDF remediation request. We do ask that you try UJA PDF remediation first and explore other options before contacting us because our resources are limited. We do have some student workers who are trained to do this, but again, with the amount of stuff that's available, we would love for you guys to do these other things before coming to us. But if you are also just not sure and you want to consult with us about other alternative formats or accessibility strategies and what would be the best version for a document or situation, you can always contact us. Even if we're not able to remediate the PDF, and sometimes textbooks that are, multiple columns with multiple images and multiple sections are really difficult. We can consult about other alternative formats or accessibility strategies. One thing that I don't think I mentioned here, but that I talk about in the decision tree is OER textbooks specifically, and is also a great resource. She's here today. Um, OER textbooks also need to be made compliant, and there was a lot of efforts this summer to convert them to LibreText is one example. A lot of math books have been converted to an online website readable version, or they're also providing Word document versions of textbooks that were only in PDF before. So again, before you spend your effort, see if other people have already spent effort and you can benefit from the efforts that they made. Okay, fill in the blank decision tree. This one's a little bit shorter and a little bit more scenario based. It's only 7 questions. And I have some more specific examples. So the first 3 questions are about style, format, and printing. Is your fill in the blank document a learning activity? Is it a form? Is it going to be distributed to students in printable format? Because there's going to be different considerations for each scenario. So for a printed fill in the blank document, I have an example for this. Um, in a way that allows responses to be typed or written by hand. Um, so if you're expecting students to be able to write in the blanks of what it is, reforming the document to be in a question and answer format that allows for responses below the question or even just beside it, but without a line there, or on a different document. Here's the 3 questions on the board, write them down like old school, high school part where your teacher would go on the chalkboard and be like, here's the 3 questions that were explained today, and you would write them down. This improves the experience for students with screen readers, but also for students who have large handwriting or students who experience discomfort when writing by hand. So this is where we go back to the idea of equity for all. It's not just about accommodations. I have very large handwriting. I have never been able to get my handwriting into the fill in the blank things, and it always causes a bunch of stress and anxiety for me. So if there's an option where I don't have to write in a teeny tiny blank with my large handwriting or try to shrink it, that makes me happy. So here's an example of converting to just a Q&A format. This was one of our beloved faculty in residence, Jamie, who sent me this. We were actually working on it together. Writing the name of the chemical compound next to the chemical fora, she had a nice little underscore of where she wanted it to go. All we had to do instead it was just remove the direction of next to allow people to have time if they wanted to do that, and just delete the blank. That was it. That's all we had to do to get rid of the weird, funky situation with the fill in the blank thing. And the reason why we want to get rid of the blank is because there is no way to make blank spaces in a Word document that do not use spaces or other characters that will be read aloud by a screen reader. So to get around this, sometimes people will use the word blank and a decorative line or underline white text. However, this is not really an effective strategy when you're thinking about inputting text electronically and what a screen reader would say and how to give directions on where to fill in the particular blank. So here's one example if you're using that sort of blank approach, which again, you can do, but if you're asking them to fill in the blank, then you need to give directions on how to do that. So to fill in the blanks, this is assuming there's a Word document here. Place the cursor after the letter K in blank, delete the word blank, and type the correct answer, because that's what they would have to do. And so the way that the screen reader would read it would be the blank brown fox jumps over the blank dog, which again, that's fine. But is it awkward? Yeah. So that is one thing where if you just delete the blank and reformat the question, there's no awkwardness in that sense. Here's another version where if you have the underscore, it's even more annoying and awkward. The underscore brown fox jumps under the underscore dog. To fill in the blanks, place the cursor after the eighth underscore after the first the and type the correct answer, then place the cursor after the eighth underscore after the second the and then type in the correct answer, right? And it makes your formatting all weird. We know this when, we are encountering these that having to either delete underscores or write afterwards, it's just a very awkward situation. So we can still preserve this formatting through alternative approaches to documents. And one way to do that for these Mad Lib style fill in the blank things, Canvas quizzes. Both classic quizzes and new quizzes have fill in the blank questions. And the fill in the blank questions can auto grade based on the answers you have decided are allowable or close enough. New quizzes is even more specific, and you have more options when it comes to auto grading about how close an answer is to a close and how much credit you want to give based on how close those answers are. So not only is it more accessible, but potentially less work for you when it comes because you can auto grade with this feature. But if it's not being for grading, if it's for a different sort of situation, you can, as I mentioned, convert these to a fillable form PDF using Word, Adobe Acrobat Pro, and using the WebAIM tutorial on how to do that. So for form style fill in the blank questions, which is kind of like the first example where it was just like, here's this and right beside it or right after it. If your document is being used for grading and will not be printed, again, you can do it as a Canvas quiz, which is a really great option. Or you can reformat it to be in that question and answer format that allows for responses below the question or in a separate document. So those are two different strategies. Often the question and answer format can take some time potentially, but when you're weighing the time and the effort, does it take you more time to reword questions or to remediate a PDF? And there may be other technologies out there, like I don't know ChatGPT and AI, but if I said, hey, can you reword these fill in the blank questions as questions and answers? Maybe that would be something that would save you some time too. Again, I don't know the tools that are out there, but things to consider. For table style fill in the blank questions, we run into this a lot when it comes to tables. A table can be an appropriate and accessible way to format fill in the blank activities if it meets specific criteria. So the table has a header row. So every column in the table and every row, they're all going to be filled out and they all have information. That's basically if students are going to be filling out information on all of those things, awesome. Like that might be the most convenient way. And also keyboard navigation as is can tab through tables pretty easily. So that's a nice thing as well. If your table is a scale or does not require people to input information into every table cell, such as a self-evaluation rating or some sort of categorization, then a table is not really the appropriate format for that. Tables are data. Everything goes into every cell. Other ways to think about self-evaluation ratings or categorizations. One example is, again, types of Canvas quiz questions or survey questions or Microsoft form questions. All of those have different options for scales, so you can explore those. But if you're unsure of scenarios fit your particular fill in the blank documents, contact us about a consultation. We can even potentially, I've done this for people, like built an example. Like, hey, you gave me this worksheet. Here's what it looks like as a Canvas quiz. So you can see that before you decide if you want to go that route. Okay, last little thing, and this will not take very long, video and audio decision tree. So just kind of 3 questions around ownership and copyright limitations and alternative format options. And then I'm going to show you what one of the options looks like. So question number 1, do you own the video? If you own the video, yay, awesome. We can add captions. We have lots of different things. If you don't, then there's more complicated issues at play. As I've said before, all of the content owners are responsible for making their content compliant. So that includes YouTube channels that are out there that are owned by huge corporations and by people owned by everyday people. So one thing you can do is to contact the content creator. And I am speaking specifically for YouTube videos. Other situations, there are going to have to be other things to explore. So if you can contact the content creator and let them know, especially if you is a smaller organization. They may be, oh, I didn't know, anyone's using this and be able to get captions done. Or we can use Captionfy, which is going to be sort of what I'm going to end the session with is to demo Captionfy. And I will predicate this with saying that right now, Captionfy, the free option is to manually create captions. If you are going through these videos, um, you can pay a small fee to have it generate captions for you that you can then edit. But again, this was just sort of a situation to explore and think about. So, what is Captionfy? Captionfy is a wrapper that overlays on top of a YouTube video. So, similar to what they were talking about in Yuja Panorama with the OCR overlay, like it doesn't change necessarily the original document that's underneath there. Captionfy does not violate copyright because the video is still being owned and played on YouTube. So it's just a layer that's on top of it. Captionfy captions do cost money if you're not generating them manually. And again, there is some amount of cost there. I do believe it was like $30 for 1,000 minutes. So there's a lot. It's pretty reasonable and affordable. I don't know if there's an option to get college funding for any of this, but if you are on, a time crunch and you want to make sure that something is accessible, you have the option to pay for something on Captionfy. There's also a cool feature in that since it is a community, someone may have already captioned that video. So community captions are accessible to all. So it's not just like every time someone wants to caption a video, they all have to pay up and they all have to present it. It may already exist. So that's something that's really cool. And I'm going to show what it looks like. And then I'll have time for questions. So, okay. Resharing. And I don't think you're going to need audio in this, but just in case. So Captionfy creates subtitles for YouTube, fully automatic and multi-language. So if you have subtitles, it's pretty cool. They have some really great features. Community contributions, a lot of them are other languages. So, and there's also requests. So sometimes people will be like, hey, can you, caption this news report from, I don't know, France or something like that that's available online? And some volunteer will be like, yes, absolutely, I can do that. So it's really a nice thing that they have going on here. And the way that it works, as it says here, is just paste your YouTube video link. I went and found a video, UFOs Last Week Tonight by John Oliver. HBO is a big company with a lot of money. You would think that this would have been captioned. It is not. And how do I know? Because when I go to settings and I go to subtitles, the only option here is English auto-generated. So to go back to the original question, how do I know if a video is professionally captioned or not? If English auto-generated is the only option listed, then it has not been professionally captioned. It has been English auto-generated. So how do I do this and see if somebody else has done it already? So I copy this URL and I put it in here. Oops, wrong one. Copy here. I put it in. And there's no subtitles in this video yet. So what I can do is I can create subtitles, upload a subtitles file, auto-generate subtitles. That's with AI that you can then generate and then edit or create them manually with the editor. If you have a short video, 30 seconds or something like that, it might be easier just to create it manually with your own editor. So that's something to think about. And what you do after you generate the subtitles is that you can link out to it. So it will link students to essentially this page, Captionfy Video YouTube with this URL on it, so that it will always go to this hosted page and still be, this is embedded on their page. So you're linking them to a page where this is embedded, or you can embed it directly in Canvas using this HTML frame. So that is also the really cool thing about Captionfy and why we love it. is that you're able to embed it, have the caption frame on it, embed them in Canvas pages, and that's it. So that was all I had for Captionfy. We have this feedback for fall 2025 QR code, and I think it's already been put in the chat as well. So I'm going to stop sharing and do some questions and answers.
Wow. Okay, I have a table fill in the blank activity question. Do you, so I know header row would be needed and all cells would need to be blank, but would a header row and header column be okay or no?
So header rows are essentially what you have the ability to uh, designate a header, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of like the idea is that the names of the columns are made in the header so that they know when they're tabbing to next one, this one down is going to be all of this information. So however
Yeah.
you choose to organize that is going to be. So basically the if you are thinking I have different columns that also have different things, then maybe that's a more specific issue to look at how you're formatting that. But essentially, header row is the way that you can create that, I guess, designation. There's not really a header column option.
Oh, because maybe I was confused because in
Yeah.
Canvas there is you can assign a header row and a header column. Um, and so I was wondering, well, if I do have that, can the rest of the cells be blank? But
Yeah, this was more document, like Word document oriented. So Canvas will have different considerations if you are going that route, which yay, always good. And we are going to have, open labs where you can ask these kinds of questions and specific things for sticky situations.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. Don.
My mouse was like way far away. Okay. So, sometimes there's like space considerations. Like when I came in a little bit late, but when you were talking about like where you're going to put the open space for them to put information. Um, so if this is a document you're handing out in class and I'm going to print them, I think it's going to be much longer in this accessible format. So where's the balance in that?
Yeah, it's going to depend on your situation, and how much space you're leaving in between, or if what you're asking them to do can be done also on a different document, as I said. So you could potentially have students typing answers, if they are not a person who can do things manually. Like I have a wrist injury. So sometimes I can't write things manually and I have to type them up. So being able to do that in a separate document is a version of that where you don't always have to anticipate everything a student needs or how much space they might need to write something, but not prescribing the space that it has to fit in. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. So as opposed to saying you have 1 inch to write what this is, how can you format a document that gives them more space or different options that is not saying you have 1 inch to get it in? So it's not
Okay.
going to be a one size fits all. It's going to really depend on every single document.